We are finally reaching the end of the WWF MOOC on extended producer responsibility. Let's have a look back at the key takeaways. Extended producer responsibility is a powerful policy tool accelerating the transition towards a circular economy. EPR extends producers' responsibility to the management of their packaging's waste. Thus, it supports the development of effective waste management systems downstream. Upstream, it incentivizes waste reduction and increased recyclability through design changes. In collective responsibility schemes, the producers of packaged goods pay fees to the Producer Responsibility Organization, which organizes all activities associated with the EPR system. It manages the fees, coordinates between stakeholders in the value chain, and is responsible for contracting waste management service providers who collect, sort, recycle, or dispose of the packaging waste. The EPR system is regulated and monitored by a government agency. The legal framework defines what materials are covered, which companies are obliged to participate, what standard services must fulfill, and what targets must be met. Effective and fair EPR schemes must abide by some key design principles. The roles and responsibilities must be clearly defined. Producers must be treated equally, creating a level playing field. Transparency and monitoring must be ensured throughout the EPR scheme to ensure that all actors fulfill their responsibilities. The system must be financially sustainable by paying for all its services through the fees paid by obliged companies and incomes from material sales. The EPR scheme must ensure cooperation across the value chain to prove effective. EPR schemes must be adapted to the local context in order to address local challenges and make use of available knowledge and resources. They must therefore also ensure the inclusion of informal workers and small enterprises. However, above all, EPR schemes must set the path towards circularity, mandating ambitious targets for collection, recycling, waste reduction, and use of recyclable materials in packaging. This course has given you an overview of the key aspects of EPR schemes. The last question that remains is, how can we get started? The following steps can provide a very rough guide for implementing an effective EPR scheme. The first step of setting up an effective EPR scheme consists of building knowledge and connecting relevant stakeholders. Guiding questions should be: what problems does your country face? What solutions have other countries found to similar problems? Where does the local context differ in your country? Interested stakeholders should begin by analyzing existing waste management systems and initiatives, as well as requirements and opportunities for EPR schemes. They need to both understand the local context and learn from EPR schemes around the world to be able to set up a well-adapted EPR scheme. By taking this course, you have already started on this journey. A concerted effort by all relevant stakeholders is needed to make EPR reality. Multi-stakeholder working groups can enable this by creating a joint understanding of what an EPR scheme should entail. They provide a space for learning, discussion, and cooperation from which joint action can arise. This includes advising the government on the creation of the legal framework and rolling out a pilot EPR scheme. Such working groups should include government agencies, producers and waste management service providers, informal actors, as well as civil society and academic experts. The EPR framework itself must give answers to the questions posed throughout this course. What are the different actors' responsibilities and what companies are obliged to participate? What packaging materials are covered by the EPR scheme? What targets are set, for example, for collection, recycling, or recyclable material content in packaging? What monitoring mechanisms and penalties are put in place? What agency is responsible for operating these? How is the PRO structured? Who operates registers and what data is disclosed? How are informal economies included in the EPR scheme? How must fees be modulated? What incentives are set for redesigning packaging? How is separation at source promoted? What standards must collection and recycling systems fulfill? How can markets for recycled materials be created? The EPR scheme must be aligned with other environmental and waste management policies. It should be integrated in a larger policy strategy, such as a circular economy roadmap. This should outline waste reduction and recycling targets and how these can be achieved. As part of the strategy, supportive policies may create rapid change and supplement incentives set by EPR schemes. For example, Thailand banned single-use plastic bags from 2020 onwards, even though their EPR scheme is still under consultation. Singapore announced mandatory reporting on packaging materials for 2022, thereby already creating registers which can support a future EPR scheme. Further policies may include environmental taxes to incentivize waste reduction, mandatory use of recycled materials in packaging, or minimum standards for waste management services. Harmonization of such laws with the EPR scheme can ensure their effectiveness. For example, companies should only have to register and pay once for their packaging waste. Monitoring tasks should be clearly defined to ensure accountability. While the mandatory legal framework is set up, government and private sector should work together to create a pre-PRO and a voluntary EPR scheme. In many countries, voluntary initiatives of private companies already exist, which aim to foster recycling activities. These initiatives will never be enough to tackle the challenges at hand in themselves. However, they can provide practical experience for implementing a mandatory EPR scheme. Collaboration with the private sector should be fostered to create a voluntary EPR scheme with a pre-PRO. This pre-PRO can create structures which can be used in the mandatory EPR scheme. It may already establish executive and advisory boards, define membership and responsibilities, as well as establish fee and monitoring systems. It should also begin hiring qualified staff and developing the expertise necessary to later run the mandatory PRO. Besides this organizational work, the pre-PRO can establish pilot projects and small-scale EPR schemes. For example, in Chile, the first voluntary PRO for packaging waste was founded as the EPR scheme was still under consultation. It has implemented a pilot recycling scheme in one neighborhood of Santiago de Chile to gather data for the rollout of a nationwide EPR scheme. Once the mandatory legal framework is put into place, the pre-PRO can be transformed into the mandatory PRO. This will require a transition phase in which membership is expanded, registration and monitoring systems put in place, and contracts with waste operators are finalized. However, work on the EPR scheme will not be over. It should be regularly evaluated and adapted to enhance its effectiveness and take changes in waste production and recycling into account. The EPR scheme's targets must be regularly adapted to remain ambitious. Fee modulation and regulations need to be fine-tuned to enhance recyclability and reduce waste production. Take Germany, one of the first countries to introduce EPR. Its system is still evolving 28 years later. All right, so rolling out an EPR scheme is a lot of work, but there is also plenty of help out there. We have gathered a bunch of experiences and analyses for you to learn from. Feel free to return to this course and go deeper into the material which interests you. You can also use the forum to discuss any open questions. You also have allies on this journey. WWF is one of them. Thank you for joining us in this MOOC on Extended Producer Responsibility. We hope that you enjoyed this course and are ready to take the next steps in promoting EPR. I am Erica Mitrich, and it was my pleasure to get you started on the path towards a circular economy. Xin Chen will now have the last word to tell you more about the ways WWF is supporting the introduction of EPR schemes.
Thank you for guiding us through this insightful course, Erica. Now you have finished this course, and you should know what effective EPR schemes look like and what is needed to put them into place. But we won't leave you alone from here. With WWF Broad Network and the office on the ground, we are happy to offer our help where we can. Do not hesitate to reach out to WWF and our partners, as we can often help you get started with country-specific analysis, our network, and experience. We can also help you setting up the EPR scheme, for example, identifying the appropriate PRO model or facilitating multi-stakeholder engagement. As highlighted throughout this course, EPR scheme built on systemic approach and rely on cooperation amongst all the relevant stakeholders. WWF works to facilitate this transition towards circular economy. We cannot make this happen alone and welcome you to partner with us in this journey.